Nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
We've taken out their senior technologists who are leading the race to build atomic weapons.
Will Iran be struck again? Or are we watching a slow march towards something even bigger? Both Israel and the US keep talking about threats, red lines, and security, while their alliance grows tighter with every new shipment of weapons and every new military move. On paper, they present themselves as defenders of order, but to much of the world, the picture looks very different. In Gaza, thousands of civilians were killed, entire neighborhoods were flattened, and basic survival became a daily struggle. Human rights were spoken about in press briefings, yet ignored on the ground, as hospitals, homes, and aid routes were hit again and again. So when Washington and Tel Aviv now claim concern about human rights inside Iran, people are asking hard questions. Do they genuinely care about the Iranian people? Or is this language just another tool to justify pressure, sanctions, and possible war? Iran's stance has been clear. It says its nuclear and missile programs are about defense and leverage, especially after decades of threats, sanctions, and assassinations of its scientists. So what's going to happen next? With US warships moving closer, talks dragging on, and Israel pushing for action. And how will this power struggle reshape the Middle East if one wrong move is made? Keep watching as we uncover what's really driving this crisis, who stands to gain, and who will pay the price if diplomacy fails. As of February 19th, 2026, the situation between Iran, Israel, and the United States is sitting on a knife's edge, and anyone telling you this is stable is not being honest. The language from Washington and Tel Aviv has grown sharper. The military presence in the region has grown heavier, and yet talks with Iran are still dragging on, barely holding the line between pressure and open conflict. According to recent briefings by the International Atomic Energy Agency, Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium is measured in several thousand kilograms, with a portion enriched well above the limits set under the 2015 nuclear deal. That alone is enough material, if further processed, for multiple nuclear devices. The United States has said it wants any deal with Iran to include not just limits on nuclear enrichment, but also restrictions on Iran's ballistic missile program and its backing of armed groups across the region, including financial, military, and logistical assistance to proxies such as Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, and other allied militias. U.S. officials argue that without curbing these broader activities, a long-term peace deal will not hold. Iran has so far refused to negotiate on its missile program or its regional support network, insisting it will only discuss its nuclear activities in return for sanctions relief. Since late 2025, the United States has kept a strong military presence near the Middle East by sending major aircraft carriers into nearby waters. Two of the main carriers involved are the US Gerald R. Ford and the US Dwight D. Eisenhower. These are massive floating air bases. Each carrier carries more than 60 fighter jets and support aircraft, allowing the US to launch airstrikes far inland without using bases in other countries. Each carrier is protected by warships armed with long-range missiles and air defense systems that can shoot down rockets and track threats in the air. Together, a single carrier group includes thousands of sailors, dozens of combat aircraft, and missiles that can hit targets hundreds of miles away. This gives the U.S. the ability to respond quickly to almost any situation in the region. U.S. officials say these deployments are meant to protect allies and prevent wider conflict. But the size and firepower of these forces suggests something more serious. This is not a routine patrol. It is a clear show of strength meant to pressure Iran, back up diplomatic demands, and keep military action ready if talks fail. Israel has been the loudest voice pushing for that pressure. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has repeatedly framed Iran as an immediate threat, not a future one. His government has argued that diplomacy only buys Iran time. At the same time, Israel has benefited from massive U.S. military backing. Since October 2023, U.S. military support to Israel has included precision-guided munitions, artillery shells, armored vehicles, and air defense interceptors. Independent estimates put the value of emergency and ongoing U.S. military assistance during this period in the tens of billions of dollars. That support matters because of what happened in Gaza. Since late 2023, more than 70,000 Palestinians have been reported killed in the Gaza Strip, according to local health authorities and international humanitarian agencies. A large share of those killed were women and children. Over 70% of homes in some areas were damaged or destroyed. Hospitals operated at a fraction of capacity, with fuel shortages and repeated strikes crippling the health system. These are not vague claims. These are counted bodies, collapsed buildings, and displaced families measured in the hundreds of thousands. Throughout this, the United States kept sending weapons, kept vetoing or blocking serious action at international forums, and kept repeating that Israel had the right to defend itself. That context matters, because now the same actors are claiming deep concern for human rights inside Iran. That contradiction is not lost on anyone paying attention. You cannot supply bombs and artillery that level civilian areas, then suddenly wrap yourself in humanitarian language when it suits your geopolitical goals. For many outside the West, this looks less like concern and more like convenience. Iran's leadership understands this dynamic very well. Tehran argues that its nuclear program exists because it cannot trust external guarantees. From Iran's point of view, countries that gave up their deterrence have often paid the price later. The current standoff follows a long record of pressure, broken deals, and military actions that shape how Iran sees the world today. When officials in Washington say Iran should trust diplomacy, they skip over the fact that Iran already tried that path once, and it ended badly. In 2015, Iran signed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, commonly known as the Nuclear Deal. Under that agreement, Iran reduced its uranium enrichment, shipped out most of its enriched stockpile, dismantled centrifuges, and accepted the most intrusive inspection regime ever placed on a country that did not have nuclear weapons. The International Atomic Energy Agency confirmed repeatedly that Iran was in compliance. Then, in 2018, the United States walked away from the deal. Sanctions were reimposed at full scale. Iran's oil exports collapsed. Its currency lost much of its value. Foreign companies pulled out. Ordinary Iranians paid the price through inflation, shortages, and economic strain. From Tehran's point of view, this was proof that agreements with Washington can be reversed overnight, regardless of compliance. What followed made things worse. Between 2018 and 2022, multiple Iranian nuclear scientists were killed in targeted attacks inside Iran. Facilities linked to the nuclear program were hit by cyber operations and suspected sabotage. The most high-profile case was the killing of Mohsen Fakhrizadeh in 2020, an attack Iranian officials blamed on Israel. These were not accidents. They were deliberate actions aimed at weakening Iran while it was still technically bound by an agreement the other side had abandoned. So when Iranian leaders say they will not dismantle their missile program or cut ties with regional allies, this is the history they are thinking about. Missiles, from Iran's perspective, are not tools for conquest. They are the one part of its military that cannot be neutralized easily by sanctions or air power. Iran watched what happened to Iraq in 2003 and Libya in 2011. Both had weak deterrence. Both were attacked. Both regimes collapsed. Tehran draws its own conclusions from those examples. Israel, meanwhile, has continued expanding its own military reach. In the last 2 years alone, Israeli strikes have caused destruction in Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. That is 6 different territories affected by Israeli military action in a very short time. In Gaza, the scale of destruction has been extreme. Entire districts have been flattened. Satellite imagery shows wide areas reduced to rubble. According to humanitarian agencies, more than 1.7 million people were displaced at the peak of the fighting. Journalists, doctors, and aid workers were killed in large numbers. These are documented incidents, not speculation. Yet during this same period, Israel continued to receive advanced weapons and political cover from the United States. Precision-guided bombs, air defense systems, and spare parts for aircraft kept flowing. At the United Nations Security Council, resolutions calling for ceasefires or investigations were blocked or weakened. The message was clear: Israel would not face serious consequences for its crimes. This is why talk of human rights rings hollow to many outside the Western sphere. The same governments that speak loudly about Iranian repression remained quiet or defensive when Palestinian civilians were dying by the tens of thousands. This double standard is visible in voting records, arms transfers, and public statements. The nuclear question sits at the heart of this contradiction. Israel is widely believed to possess between 80 and 90 nuclear warheads, based on estimates from independent research groups. It has delivery systems by air, land, and sea. It does not allow international inspections of its nuclear sites. It is not part of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. None of this triggers sanctions. None of this brings threats of airstrikes. Iran, on the other hand, does not have nuclear weapons. It remains a signatory to the treaty. It allows inspectors on its soil. Yet it faces constant pressure, threats, and economic punishment. To much of the global South, this looks less like non-proliferation and more like power politics. The United States plays a central role in keeping this imbalance in place. Washington presents itself as a neutral broker, but its actions show clear alignment. Since late 2025, U.S. military activity around Iran has increased. Surveillance flights have intensified. Naval patrols have expanded. War games with regional allies have grown larger. Officials say these moves are defensive. Iran sees them as preparation. Inside the U.S. government, there is also division. Some officials argue that pressure will force Iran back to the table on American terms. Others warn that this approach risks pushing Iran closer to a nuclear threshold instead of pulling it back. The longer sanctions stay in place, the less incentive Iran has to compromise. This is not theory. It is observable behavior over the last several years. Israel's leadership, led by Benjamin Netanyahu, has consistently rejected any deal that leaves Iran with enrichment capability, even at low levels. Netanyahu has argued for years that Iran must be stopped by force if necessary. This position is popular with parts of Israel's political base, especially during times of internal crisis. When domestic pressure rises, external threats often take center stage. There is also the regional angle. Gulf states watch this situation closely. Some fear Iran's influence. Others fear a war that would disrupt shipping lanes, energy markets, and internal stability. A major conflict involving Iran would not stay contained. It would affect oil prices, global trade, and security far beyond the Middle East. The risk of miscalculation is high. A single strike on an Iranian facility, even if limited, would almost certainly trigger a response. Iran has made that clear. Its allies in Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen would not stay on the sidelines. Israel's cities would face retaliation. U.S. bases in the region would become targets. What starts as a limited action could spread fast. History gives plenty of warnings. The 2006 war between Israel and Hezbollah began with a border incident. The U.S. invasion of Iraq followed claims that later proved false. Once violence starts, narratives harden and exits disappear. Iran's leaders believe time is on their side. They see U.S. influence declining in parts of the world. They see closer ties with China and Russia. They see countries trading outside the dollar system. From their view, holding firm may be safer than trusting promises that can vanish with a change of administration. For ordinary people across the region, this power struggle offers little hope. Iranians live under sanctions. Palestinians live under occupation and blockade. Israelis live with fear of rockets and attacks. None of these populations benefit from escalation. yet decisions are made far above them. If diplomacy fails again, it will not be because options were exhausted. It will be because some actors believed force was easier than fairness. The current crisis is not just about centrifuges or missiles. It is about credibility, double standards, and whose lives are treated as disposable. Until those deeper issues are faced honestly, the cycle will continue. Pressure will lead to resistance. Resistance will lead to threats. And threats, sooner or later, lead to war. Before you go, drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think this situation is heading toward diplomacy, or are we being pushed closer to another war? Let us know in the comments, and we will see you in the next video.